WarGames. The name alone brings back memories of chaos, drama, and solid wrestling combat. From its creation in the late 80s by the legendary Dusty Rhodes, all the way to today, WarGames has stood the test of time as one of the most brutal and thrilling match concepts in wrestling history. Over the years, it has evolved from WCW's blood-soaked battlegrounds to becoming a centerpiece of WWE, especially with the recent Survivor Series WarGames era. And speaking of which, Survivor Series WarGames 2025 is right around the corner, this time promoted as Survivor Series WarGames San Diego. It's the fourth straight year the event has revolved around this iconic match, and fans can already feel the anticipation building. So before we head into another chapter of carnage, let's look back at the battles that defined this match type. These are the 10 best WarGames matches of all time. NWA Great American Bash 1987, The Road Warriors, Nikita Koloff, Dusty Rhodes and Paul Ellering versus the Four Horsemen, Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard, Lex Luger, and the War Machine. When people talk about the early magic of WarGames, you can't skip over the 1987 Great American Bash rematch. It went down in the brutal July heat of Miami's Orange Bowl, and it seemed as though Dusty Rhodes' insane vision was reenacting itself with 2 rings, a single cage, and anarchy. The Horsemen showed up stacked, but with a twist. J.J. Dillon was too banged up from the first WarGames, so they brought in the War Machine, who was really Big Bubba Rogers under a plain black mask. The funny thing was that fans didn't hate him the way they hated Flair, Blanchard, or Arn, which actually made the finish hit harder. From the jump, the crowd was on fire. Dusty had the crowd going wild, with every bionic elbow getting a huge reaction. The Road Warriors and Nikita Koloff just steamrolled through the Horsemen, and honestly, it never felt like the good guys were in danger. This was a display of power, and that ending, absolutely savage. War Machine got torn apart with lariats flying everywhere, and then the Road Warriors jammed that spiked armband straight into his eye until he quit. Fans went nuts, but you could tell some were wishing it had been Flair or Blanchard taking that beating instead. Still, this match was the moment everyone realised WarGames wasn't just a cool one-time idea. Dusty had created something that blended violence, drama and spectacle in a way wrestling had never seen before. It was here to stay. WCW Wrestle War 1992, Sting's Squadron versus the Dangerous Alliance. If there's ever been a WarGames match that showed how good the concept could really be, it's Wrestle War 1992. On May 17th, inside the Jacksonville Memorial Coliseum, Sting's Squadron went to war with the Dangerous Alliance in what a lot of fans still call the greatest WarGames of all time. What made it special was how perfectly it blended mayhem with smart storytelling. WarGames has always kind of worked like a southern tag match, with heels beating down the good guys until the next save. And this was that formula at its absolute peak. Rick Rude, Arn Anderson, Steve Austin, Larry Zbyszko, and Bobby Eaton were all skilled at administering punishment, making the Dangerous Alliance the ideal team for it. On the other side of them were babyfaces like Nikita Koloff, Dustin Rhodes, Barry Windham, Ricky Steamboat, and Sting, who were destined for big comebacks. Every new entrant changed the momentum, and with each exchange, the tension cranked up higher. Dustin bled buckets, showing the same grit his dad was famous for. Steamboat, already wrestling with a broken nose, sold every bit of pain in a way only he could. Austin was bleeding early too, while Arn acted like the glue, keeping everything together with his instincts. And when Sting finally hit the cage, the roof just about blew off. It felt like his building, his fight. The finish was messy, but unforgettable. Zbyszko tried to use a turnbuckle piece as a weapon, only to smash Bobby Eaton's arm by mistake. Sting knocked Zbyszko aside, secured an armbar, and forced Eaton to submit. Even with the clumsy ending, this was everything WarGames was meant to be. Violent, emotional, and dramatic from bell to bell. For a lot of fans, this is still the match that defines Dusty Rhodes' creation. WCW Wrestle War 1991. Brian Pillman, Sting and the Steiner brothers versus Larry Zbyszko and the Four Horsemen, Barry Windham, Ric Flair and Sid Vicious. WarGames has always been about grit, and few performances show that better than Brian Pillman at WrestleWar 1991. On February 24th in Phoenix, Sting and the Steiner brothers teamed with Flying Brian to take on Ric Flair, Barry Windham, Sid Vicious, and Larry Zbyszko, who was filling in for an injured Arn Anderson. With one of the bravest babyface attempts in wrestling history, what transpired was a display of pure heart. Pillman entered already nursing a bad shoulder, but you would never have guessed it from the opening bell. He started against Windham and came out swinging, putting everything he had into every shot. He even sent Windham crashing with a huge bump that set the tone. But when the Horsemen inevitably won the coin toss, the tide shifted. Flair came in next and zeroed in on Pillman's injury with that trademark cold precision. From there, the match turned into a war of attrition as Sting and the Steiners fired up the crowd with bursts of offense. But the Horsemen kept pulling the match back under their control. The finish is still infamous. Sid Vicious tried to powerbomb Pillman, but the low roof of the cage caused Pillman's feet to hit the ceiling, sending him crashing straight down on his neck. Sid, rather than stopping, picked Pillman up and hit a second powerbomb before El Gigante rushed in and surrendered the match on Pillman's behalf. The visual was scary, but in a strange way, it only added to the story of Pillman giving everything until his body simply gave out. Botched ending or not, that night turned Pillman into a hero. WrestleWar 91 is still remembered as the match where Flying Brian proved his toughness, his fire, and his place in WarGames history. NXT Takeover WarGames 2019, the Undisputed Era versus Tommaso Ciampa, Keith Lee, Dominic Dijakovic, and Kevin Owens. By 2019, WarGames had basically become an NXT tradition, and the Takeover WarGames main event in Chicago was one of the matches that best showcased it. The Undisputed Era, including Adam Cole, Roderick Strong, Bobby Fish, and Kyle O'Reilly, were the kings of the brand at that point. But on this night, they found themselves up against Tommaso Ciampa, Keith Lee, Dominic Dijakovic, and a mystery partner that had everyone buzzing. Right from the opening moments with Ciampa and Strong, the crowd was electric. Every new entrant raised the stakes as O'Reilly brought his gritty grappling. Dijakovic used his raw power, Fish lit people up with strikes, and Keith Lee amazed everyone with his freakish athleticism. Adam Cole's entrance was wild too, ending with him getting slammed through a table at ringside, a perfect snapshot of the chaos. But the real explosion came when Kevin Owens stormed out as the final man for Team Ciampa. The arena absolutely lost it, and when he hit a stunner on Cole, it was one of those goosebump-inducing moments where everything just clicked. The closing stretch was pure NXT mayhem. Dijakovic chokeslammed Strong through a table. Owens launched himself onto O'Reilly while breaking up a submission. Lee crushed Fish with a massive super spirit bomb, and then came the grand finale. Ciampa finished the match by hitting an air raid crash off the top of the cage, driving Adam Cole through 2 tables to score the win. The crowd erupted, and it was breathtaking and terrifying all at once. This was more than a victory for Ciampa's team. It was proof that NXT's version of WarGames could stand tall next to the classics. The story, the action, the surprises, everything came together to create one of the defining matches in WarGames history. NXT Takeover WarGames 2018, the Undisputed Era versus War Raiders, Pete Dunne and Ricochet. By 2018, WarGames had cemented itself as one of NXT's marquee events, and Takeover WarGames 2 gave fans the kind of chaotic, star-packed battle that lived up to the hype. On November 17th, 2018, inside the Staples Center in Los Angeles during Survivor Series weekend, the stage felt bigger than ever. The Undisputed Era, with Adam Cole, Bobby Fish, Kyle O'Reilly, and Roderick Strong, once again stepped into the cage, this time against the monstrous War Raiders, WWE United Kingdom Champion Pete Dunne, and NXT North American Champion Ricochet. Things kicked off with a clever twist. Bobby Fish locked Dunne in his holding cage and tossed the key into the crowd, giving the Era a huge advantage while they went to work with chairs and sharp teamwork. But when Dunne finally broke free, he brought the weapons with him like kendo sticks, chains, tables, quickly gaining the momentum. From there, the match turned into beautiful chaos. Ricochet flying through the air, Hansen and Rowe flattening people with double-team power, Dunne bending joints in every direction, and the Era showing off their machine-like chemistry. The match reached its peak when Ricochet and Cole fought their way to the top of the cage. trading punches while the others gathered below. A huge superplex and powerbomb combo sent everyone crashing down. Everyone except Ricochet. Still standing on top, he steadied himself and launched into a stunning double rotation moonsault onto the pile, a moment that instantly became one of NXT's most iconic highlights. The finish saw Dunn hit the bitter end on Cole, followed immediately by Ricochet's 450 splash, and together they pinned Adam Cole. It was a long, chaotic war, but the atmosphere, big spots, and fan energy made it unforgettable. Great American Bash 1989, Road Warriors, Midnight Express, and Steve Williams versus Fabulous Freebirds, Samu and Fatu. When fans look back at the best WarGames matches of the 80s, the 1989 Great American Bash always comes up. On one side stood a powerhouse team of babyfaces, the Road Warriors, the Midnight Express, and Dr. Death Steve Williams, led by managers Jim Cornette and Paul Ellering. Across the ring were the Fabulous Freebirds, joined by Samu and Fatu, with a young Paul E. dangerously in their corner. Long before the world knew him as Paul Heyman, the match started with the heels on top, as Jimmy Garvin and Terry Gordy punished Bobby Eaton. But once Williams stepped inside, everything shifted. In one of the night's unforgettable moments, Dr. Death showed off his freakish strength by press-slamming the massive Gordy and ramming him into the roof of the cage 8 times in a row. The crowd went crazy, and from there, the intensity only grew. The Road Warriors were always booked as the ultimate game changers, and here, that role belonged to Hawk. Fans chanted, "We want Hawk!" And when he finally entered as the last man, the roof nearly blew off. He tore through the Freebirds with crushing clotheslines, a neck breaker, and pure brute force, seizing control right away. The finish came when Hawk trapped Garvin in a brutal hangman's neck breaker, leaving him no choice but to submit. Even without blood, this WarGames had everything: punishing action, a steady build, and a payoff that felt just right. It's still remembered as one of the standout matches of the era, proof that raw intensity can be just as powerful as Crimson Chaos. NXT Takeover WarGames 2017 Undisputed Era versus Sanity versus Authors of Pain and Roderick Strong. When WWE revived WarGames at NXT Takeover in 2017, the anticipation was electric. Fans had waited nearly 2 decades for Dusty Rhodes' creation to return, and when the double cage lowered over the 2 rings inside Houston's Toyota Center, the atmosphere was buzzing. This version came with some twists. No roof, 3 teams instead of 2, and pinfalls allowed, but chaos, violence, and spectacle remained at the core of WarGames. From the opening moments, it was wild. Adam Cole, Eric Young, and Roderick Strong set the stage before the Authors of Pain stormed in like wrecking balls, tossing bodies across rings. Then Sanity brought the weapons, escalating the brutality. Killian Dane chained the cage door shut and swallowed the key for good measure before launching himself off the ropes with a thunderous dive. Not stopping there, he pulled off an insane Van Terminator, smashing Kyle O'Reilly with a coast-to-coast dropkick that had the crowd roaring. Alexander Wolf left his mark too, hitting a German suplex through a table that split his head open in the process, blood dripping as the chaos raged on. And then came the visual that defined the night. Adam Cole climbed to the very top of the cage, proudly declaring Adam Cole Bay-Bay, before Roderick Strong suplexed him from the heavens onto everyone below. Fittingly, as Dusty Rhodes and Arn Anderson, 2 men forever linked to WarGames, watched from ringside, Cole seized his moment. He smashed Eric Young with a kendo stick, then drilled him with a running knee strike that drove Young's head into a steel chair to score the win. Messy, brutal, unforgettable. This was the perfect reintroduction of WarGames to a new generation. WWE Survivor Series 2023 Team Cody vs Judgment Day. By the time Survivor Series 2023 came around, WarGames had firmly become one of WWE's signature matches, and this year's edition felt like it carried more emotion than sheer chaos. Instead of leaning on non-stop stunts, it thrived on sharp execution and layered storytelling. Every move mattered, and every beat had purpose. The Judgment Day entered looking stronger than ever, with Drew McIntyre fueled by his grudge against Jey Uso and Sami Zayn. On the other side, Cody Rhodes and Seth Rollins had to coexist despite their shaky history. Zayn once again proved why fans rally behind him, and McIntyre's fury erupted every time he locked eyes with Jay. The tension made every exchange feel heavy, but the biggest moment of the night was saved for the end. After being out of action since May 2022 with a serious back injury, Randy Orton finally returned, and the Chicago crowd nearly blew the roof off. His presence flipped the momentum instantly. Not long after, Rollins and Zayn threw JD McDonough off the cage and straight into an RKO from Orton, and the crowd went wild. Orton stood up, gave Cody a quick handshake and nod, and then handed him the spotlight. Cody took advantage of the situation and scored the victory by hitting Damian Priest with a crossroads. It wasn't the bloodiest or wildest WarGames, but it was WWE storytelling at its finest. There was redemption, rivalries, and the long-awaited comeback of a legend. In the end, Team Cody stood tall, closing the show on a note that was all about heart as much as spectacle. NXT Takeover, WarGames 2019, Team Ripley versus Team Baszler. Few WarGames matches have ever packed the kind of drama and emotion that the women's battle at NXT Takeover WarGames 2019 delivered. On paper, it was supposed to be a standard 4-on-4 showdown, but everything flipped upside down when Dakota Kai shockingly turned on her own best friend, Tegan Nox. She brutalized Nox's already fragile knee and walked out, leaving Rhea Ripley and Candice LeRae hopelessly outnumbered against Shayna Baszler's crew of Baszler, Io Shirai, Bianca Belair, and Kay Lee Ray. The crowd didn't hold back as shocked gasps mixed with angry boos filled the arena. Mauro Ranallo's commentary only added to the chaos, labelling Kai's betrayal as absolutely disgusting. Against all odds, Ripley and LeRae refused to back down. Belair threw her weight around with raw power. Shirai flew through the air with jaw-dropping dives including a moonsault off the top of the cage, and Kay Lee Ray made sure to bring the cruelty. Every time it looked like the match was slipping away, Ripley and LeRae clawed their way back. LeRae wowed the crowd with big moves, including a wild avalanche poison Rana, while Ripley kept swinging chairs and trash cans like her life depended on it. The finish was unforgettable. Baszler locked Ripley in the dreaded Kirifuda clutch, and it looked over. But Ripley pulled out handcuffs, snapping herself to Baszler so Shayna couldn't escape. With the crowd going crazy, Ripley fired up, lifted Baszler, and slammed her through the chairs with a huge riptide for the victory. The crowd erupted. Mauro Ranallo lost his voice, and Rhea Ripley stood tall, transforming from rising star into undeniable main event force. NWA Anarchy Hostile Environment 2006, Team Anarchy vs Devil's Reject. When fans talk about the greatest WarGames matches, the spotlight usually shines on WCW or WWE, but buried in Cornelia, Georgia. In 2006, NWA Wildside delivered one of the most violent, emotionally gripping WarGames matches ever. Team Anarchy, including Ace Rockwell, Nemesis, Shadow Jackson, and Slim J, went to war with the Devil's Rejects, a faction that looked like they stepped straight out of a horror movie, involving Azrael, Iceberg, Sean Tempers, and Tank, led by the sinister Reverend Dan Wilson. The stakes couldn't have been higher. Control of the promotion itself was on the line, with the added promise that if Anarchy won, owner Jerry Palmer would finally get 5 minutes alone with Wilson inside the cage. From the start, the atmosphere was different. This wasn't about big ooh-ah spots for gifs. It felt like survival. Slim J, fighting through an injured eye, kicked things off by diving off the cage, not as a flashy stunt, but like a guy throwing himself into a street fight. Ace Rockwell's bad arm was targeted mercilessly. Everyone bled, everyone suffered, and the small Georgia crowd lived and died with every blow. The match built to a grotesque, unforgettable climax. Rockwell seized a claw hammer and tried to rip out Tank's cheek, a visual that burned into the memory of those who witnessed it. The war might have ended with Anarchy's victory, but the aftermath was just as chilling. Palmer finally got his shot at Reverend Dan, only for the Devil's Rejects to pounce on him, leaving him beaten down and carried out on a stretcher. Fans were so invested that they followed the ambulance to the hospital, refusing to let go of the story. It wasn't polished, it wasn't pretty, but it was real, and that's what made it a WarGames masterpiece. Marvelous verdict. WarGames has always been an experience, From Dusty Rhodes' original vision of chaos and camaraderie to the blood-soaked battles of WCW, from hidden gems like NWA Wildside to the polished brutality of WWE and NXT, this concept has endured for nearly 4 decades without losing its bite. Generation has added its own flavour, the raw grit of the 80s, the violent innovation of the indies, and WWE's modern spectacle that puts storytelling at the forefront. And now, as we head into Survivor Series WarGames San Diego 2025, the 4th straight year that WWE's November Classic has been defined by this brutal stipulation, it's clear the legacy is still alive and thriving. WarGames remains wrestling's ultimate test of endurance, creativity, and survival. Thanks for watching. What's your favourite WarGames match of all time? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more marvellous wrestling deep dives.